Yeah, one more. In total, we have 4 students.
Right. So there we are. We've got 3. I wonder if the 4th is going to come in a minute. Well, perhaps we better get on. I'm sorry, this is a week for grant writing. We have to get a grant in basically tomorrow, so I won't spend a lot of time debating the niceties. Jasmine's here. So we're all. I think we're all here. That's good. So welcome to all the 4 newcomers. This is good, and we've obviously got our sort of experienced people, Zuna and Tini, both here, and we've got the people who know more about all this sort of thing, Sandia and Mel, who are also here. So I think we're all here, and they will be advising the group as they've always done in these issues. So I think this is good. What I just for the information of those who are new, who are doing 494, I think it is, then let me just say that one of the big issues that we faced recently is debate about carbohydrate and what makes carbohydrate good. As you know, there are a lot of people who are saying we should all not be eating too much carbohydrate. The low carbohydrate diet craze has become very important. It's actually finished off some of the pasta industries that have collapsed because of it. And the potato farmers are worrying about whether they can sell potato. The only people who seem to be somewhat protected are the wheat producers, because even though carb may be bad, everyone is saying that whole wheat is a good idea. So they're about the only carbohydrate producers who are getting any mileage. Currently, the rest, I think, are in difficult straits and have been for about sort of 10 years now. There was a time when they were much more buoyant. Is that important? Well, I do think it is important, because I think that carbohydrate foods are generally good. More than 50% of the nutrient consumed by anyone on this planet is carbohydrate. It's the big component of your diet. I mean, you have a certain amount of protein foods, you eat a certain amount of fatty foods, but the majority of your calories come from carbohydrate. So it's a very important thing to look at. And I think we can say that it's got the potential for being related to many of the diseases, certainly the diseases of Western civilization, which is what we're facing right now. So I think there's an urgent need to define what sort of carbohydrates we should be eating. Let the carbohydrate haters cut out the bad carbohydrates, if you like, but don't let them touch the good carbohydrates, which are part of what needs to be a healthy diet. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about things like peas, beans, lentils, these sort of foods, the pastas, the noodles, these sort of foods, whole grain products, which contain lots of other things, including minerals and proteins. These are useful. Fruit and vegetables, which you've been trying to get people to eat for a long while, these are useful carbohydrate forms. So let's just throw out carbohydrate. Let's be very specific. To do that, we've attached one particular measure, the glycemic index, which measures the rate with which you absorb carbohydrate from a food. So if you've got a slow absorption pattern and don't require a lot of insulin, then that would be a low glycemic index food. If you've got a food which causes a high rise in blood glucose, creates the need for a lot of insulin secretion, that would be a high glycemic index food. And we're saying that it may be the fact that if you have foods that challenge your system by making you secrete too many hormones and then having the results of rapid uptake of carbohydrate, which generates free radicals, things that damage proteins and fats and damage DNA too, so it may cause cancer. If you have high rises, you do get into trouble. But if you have a flat curve, you're probably doing well. And then you can make use of the nutrient that you're taking. Those would be the low glycemic index foods. We, I think, have shown that there seem to be a lot of good things. You can treat diabetes that way, even when people have diabetes with low glycemic index diets. But unfortunately, when big meta-analyses have been done, certainly one that was done by Reynolds for the World Health Organization not so long ago, he came to the conclusion that the glycemic index was a waste of time. But the reason was there were always no studies. So I think you can say things are a waste of time if you can study them. Just because you haven't shown a positive result, if you don't have any results, it's difficult to show a positive or a negative result. So the truth is, he never showed a negative result, but it just didn't show any results, so he said it was irrelevant. And we felt that was a little bit wrong. And so we've been looking at this over a period of time. And we certainly, our last group, in the 494 group, and Zunan and Tina here, can say that that really was a very, very poor general summary of the glycemic index and its effects. How do they know? Well, the reason was because they did meta-analyses. What they did is they bundled up, not just looking at one or two studies, but they bundled up all the studies they could find that were related to a particular outcome, like diabetes, not diabetes actually, but like cancer, like cardiovascular disease, the two big killers. They looked at those and they found it was quite different. One sees a very different picture. One sees a protective effect, which is significant for cardiovascular disease, and a significant effect for certain cancers, and not all, but certain. And if you think of it, it's not so surprising for the cancers, because some cancers are diabetes related. And so if you've got a diabetes related cancer, surely if you can get something that might be good for diabetes, it could also be due to the related cancers. So that's what we've been looking at. And I think we've got to a stage now where we want to try and make these more detailed so that we know what the results are and they're publishable, which takes a little extra work. And those extra bits of work we'd like your help with, and you will be able to use those for the 494 presentations and course write-up. You'll come in on a lot of data that have already been looked at, so you don't have to, you really have to increase by about that much rather than coming right from the bottom all the way up, so that a lot of the study will have been done, but it certainly needs tidying up and updating, making sure that it's up to date. So that, I think, is where we should be going. I may just hand over in a minute to Zunan and Tini, because they're the people who may be able to use your help, and in whose area you will have your thesis, as it were, and your write-up. So I think that will be good. Let me just say that Zunan has literally zoomed ahead on this one, and she's already got a publication that she's put together, and we're really just sort of trying to tighten the nuts and bolts on it. So I think that's good. I think Tini, that's on the cancer side. On the cardiovascular side, I think Tini is there too, but we're a little bit behind in terms of possible updating, possible being specific about certain things. and possibly including a somewhat broader range of outcomes. So I think that's as I see it where we are. So what we've done on the cancer side so far is to look at the cancer mortality, which I think is important. Does a dietary approach, for example, the glycemic index, change your trajectory either before or after you've been diagnosed with cancer? I think that's important. So is it preventive in terms of incidence, or is it preventive in terms of outcome? So I think those are important areas. I think we've divided the cancers into two sides, those that are diabetes related and those that aren't diabetes related. Both of those we look at separately. And I think we've got progress on both of those. But again, I will let Sue-Nan talk a little bit more about what she sees there. From the point of view of the cardiovascular side, I think that Tini and Fred worked in that area, and they've got, I think, a relatively clear picture on myocardial infarction and stroke. I think we're sort of getting to a place where those data can be drawn together, but will take some more work. Again, I'll let Tini address that as she sees it, and then Sandy and Mel can discuss what they think is required to get everything straight as things go at present. So I think that, Sue-Nan, do you want to have a quick word right now about where you see the cancer study and whether you're at capacity with help?
Sure. I can explain the main findings that we find so far. So we did a meta-analysis of all of cancer, including risks and mortality and glycemic index and glycemic load, to see what is their association. And what we found so far is for mortality, there's no overall effect for GI or GL. GI is very close to significance because there is kind of limited studies available, so the power is not that big. So potentially with more studies coming out and being included in the meta-analysis, that we could potentially find an outcome. For the risks, for the cancer risks, we've got like quite a large number of studies, like I think 20, like in total it's probably 60 something. So we did find a significant association between glycemic index and diabetes related cancer risk. And this association was not found between GL and glycemic load and diabetes related cancer risk. And interestingly, we found that the glycemic load is actually seems protective for the non-diabetes related cancer. Our theory is it's probably displacing some of the intake from like other carcinogens, like red meat and processed meat. And we think the protective effect of carbohydrate might be interesting to look at for another study. So I don't know whether Dr. Jenkins want to investigate solely on glycemic index and glycemic load, or also kind of try to look at carbohydrates so that we can have a clearer picture.
No, I think I think you're quite right, Zoon. I forgot about that, but that true is worth mentioning. That certainly, I mean, you may want to look at carbohydrate. You might even want to extend that and see what the implications are with refined and unrefined type carbohydrates, if we have data available. But that would be, as you say, under the carbohydrate umbrella. I think we're almost duty bound to explore and make sure that we've updated ourselves in terms of the mortality side and in terms of the diabetes related side and the non-diabetes related side, for instance. I think that's what we said we'd try and focus on those. So I think we should make sure that those are being thoroughly done. Do you know what I mean? And wherever you need help in that area, I think we need to put a push there, because you've been working very hard over the summer on those. So I think you and I can discuss that, and perhaps at the next meeting, bring up some of these additional areas to more clearly define the nature of the project. Do you know what I mean? So that I think we can actually define exactly what people will be doing, so that, because you've only got a limited amount of time, it's one of 5 courses you're taking, whatever, you know, and so we don't want to consume too much of your time, but we want something that comes out that's reasonable. I think that's the sort of thing that we're interested in seeing. Tini, do you want to then take over and say what you think you've got on the cardiovascular side, and where, from your perspective, you see things going?
Yeah, so for me, I did it with Fred during the 494 course, and we did look at only mortality outcomes then. So we did stroke mortality, MI mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality, and all-cause mortality. And then for 3 of the outcomes, all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality, and stroke mortality, we did find that there was significance. And then for MI, we didn't find significance, but there were a very limited amount of studies for that. So I guess now I think we want to expand the outcomes and look at more than just mortality outcomes, just as like Reynolds did with, and I think we're doing diabetes as well, and all the other outcomes that they were looking at. And I'm sure there are newer studies that came out because we did the search like a year ago. So I think just having people to look at the different outcomes would be good, and we can like start our search then. And I think we also did like a subgroup analysis between male and female, and we did find that a lot of the outcomes for female, they seemed to show more significance, or they seemed to have significance, while males didn't. So that might be an interesting analysis to do towards the end.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And Zerlan, we found some male-female differences too, didn't we? So I think that's important. So I think those are the sorts of projects that we've got. I don't want to waste too much of your time on this, but I think that it gives you some idea of where we're going. And I think that we, Tini, Zunan, Sandhya, Mel, and I will have to sit down and think what the actual projects would be, so that they fit closely with where you all have to be, and also where we have to be too, so that I think we get these things done in concert, as it were, together. But I do think that one would suggest that perhaps I can ask Darshna to send some of the reprints or references round of the recent work that we've been doing in this area, that you folk can read about in the next week, so that you have some idea about the disease spectrum that we're looking at. Now, it's cardiovascular disease. Are there sort of, what metabolite differences may there be? What effects might there be in terms of perhaps cancer risk and these sort of things, and what could be the reasons? So these sort of things, because what affects things like cancer incidence are going to be the same things that affect diabetes and that affect cardiovascular disease, arterial health, as well as pancreatic health. So I think if we send you around literature so that you've got a week's worth of reading, then when the acute pressure is off us, we can get together and craft a program for you, so that you've got something to say during the presentation phase of the 494, which is a 10-minute presentation. I think is it in the the end of this year, or is it January?
There was a proposal in November, and there's a final presentation.
Right, so you've got to make sure you know what you're doing by November, which hopefully you'll be well into it by then. But anyway, we'll hopefully have that. Those are the sort of things that we can discuss in as what your timelines will be. I think that's important. So is it beginning of November or?
I think last year was mid-November.
Mid-November, right. Well, we've got a month, put it that way. So I think we should be in good shape from that point of view. And then what, it's in March, is it, when they have to give the final? I can't remember. I mean,
It's the end of March, usually.
end of March. Okay, fine. That's it. Good. So, and I think Mary LeVay, because we had problem with COVID, gave a bit longer, I think. Is that right? I think there was something like that anyway. And we will probably have another pandemic surge, as it were, over the Christmas period. So hopefully you get some longer time. But irrespective, as you could see, whether there's COVID or not, as long as we're all still standing upright, it doesn't stop us from having these sort of meetings and getting together. It'd be nice to get together sort of in person and just go over the data at the centre, which hopefully we may do, but that really does depend on the coronavirus. It's not on our plans. We'd be happy to meet whichever way. I would say you could meet in the garden outside our house, but I think the weather doesn't look as good as it had done during the summer. So who knows? And indoors you have to wear masks, so that's not a big deal. Anyway, that's I think what my thoughts right now. Let me hear from you folk. What do you folk think as you're listening to me talking away? Or Mel, Sandia, is there anything that I should have said? No, probably said too much. So, Jake and Jasmine, Yaki, any thoughts? Yemen, any thought? No?
I want to ask, are they gonna be paired up? Or
I think it's a good idea if they'd like to be paired off. Yes, that's a good idea. Do things in pairs. So if any of you find someone who you'd rather not work with, let us know. I hope not. I hope, because you all look nice people to me. So hopefully you could work together, and that's always a good thing because it means you can push ideas across to each other. You may be working on slightly different aspects, but you can all check each other's work, which I think is good. We're all for collaboration. So yes, I think, thank you, Susanna, that's a good thought. If not, we'll flick a coin and then decide. But if you know each other or not, that's always good. So is there any thoughts at all? Nothing? If not, then we meet in a week's time and I get back to writing grants.
So I'm still a little bit
Confused. Okay.
What should I do right now? Should I wait for assigned readings?
So I think what we will do is we'll send you references or readings so that you can get familiar with what we're doing. I mean, you may not read the whole thing, but you may want to read the abstract at least to take a look at the sort of direction we're going in, because those will be the sorts of references that you'll use when you're doing your write-up, both for your presentation and for your final report, because you'll want to know what's already been done and what the rationale behind this particular line of research is.
So is there an ongoing research that we are helping with, or should we come up with a new?
No, you'll be helping with ongoing research, but we'll be giving you a section of it, which you'll be closely supervised. Don't worry, we won't sort of just throw something at you and say, get on with it. No, we'll closely supervise it, but at least you'll get an idea that you've got something that is something that you're doing. Do you know what I mean? But something that's fairly controlled. But on the other hand, when you come to make a presentation, if somebody says, why are you working in this area at all? It's nice if you can say, well, we're doing so because we think it's dangerous for the pancreas. We think it causes reactive oxygen species. We think it challenges the pancreas too much. And if the pancreas fails and you get diabetes, you want to be able to, at least when people ask you questions, be able to say why you're doing it. So these will give you some rationale of why we're suggesting this as being something useful. No, we think it is. I mean, we truly, we think it's a matter of life and death, to be honest. So, you can't overstate it, but one can at least say that it is serious if one has a perpetual diet of high glycemic index foods, then one does put oneself at risk, maybe a 20%, maybe a 15%, maybe a 30% increased risk of a bad outcome like diabetes, like cardiovascular disease, possibly mortality.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for asking. No, that's important. Any other thoughts? Can I hear you? I heard something. Was it Fred? Sorry? I can just hear you, yes. Yeah. Well, when you say everyone is different, everyone's metabolism of fat is different, everyone's metabolism of protein is different, everyone's got different metabolic processes, but they've got a lot of common things as well. Some high GI what? So did you say I didn't catch that? Some high carbohydrate. I don't quite understand if you're saying that some high glycemic index carbohydrates are low glycemic index for some people. I don't think I could agree with that. I think you and I better have a conversation offline because I'm not hearing clearly, and I don't know whether any of the Mel Sandia, did you get the question? No, we haven't quite got your question, so I think.
I think I can explain it. I think I got his question. He was saying because everybody's metabolism is different. So if for example, like a high GI food for someone might appear to be a low GI food for someone else. And he was saying there is no clear definition on what food is considered high, what food is considered low.
Well, I think that's probably a good point. I think you have to know how the glycemic index is calculated. It's calculated based on the rise in blood glucose after eating a food. And you take 10 individuals, for example, and test that particular food standardized against a standard. So if I'm, say, taking cornflakes, on another day, I would take bread or 50 grams of glucose, because there are two ways you can calculate it. One gives you a higher value, the other gives you a lower value. But if we just say take bread, if you take 50 grams of white bread, you will have your own blood glucose response to that. If you take 50 grams of cornflakes, you'll have your blood glucose response to that, and it's your blood glucose response that you're looking at. If you take people around the world and you feed them bread and then you feed them cornflakes, and it's been done in places like, for example, they've looked at the native populations in Africa, and they've looked at them in Europe. And if you feed them cornflakes, they get a certain rise in blood glucose, which is higher than bread. Individuals on individual days may vary, and there is a great deal of variation in your blood glucose, your particular blood glucose response to the same food. So there's a variation there. But the important thing is that there's still that difference between, say, cornflakes and white bread. And the same if in different parts of the world you took lentils, that would cause very little rise in blood glucose. And in the same part of the world, if you took bread, it would cause a higher rise in blood glucose. Now, it's very true that different people who are more diabetic, will get higher rises, both for glucose, cornflakes, and lentils, but they'll be in the same proportion. Do you understand? I mean, this has been checked, and we can get you the publications on that, so you can look at it. And if you can find data where a low glycemic index food has been shown in a study with a randomized controlled trial, for some people it's consistently low, and for others it's consistently high, that'd be interesting. So please do find it for me. That Jacob, could be your project. Does that interest you as a project? Well, that's great, because I've never come across it, so it'll be great for you to research it. But my suggestion to you is I would research it now, in the next week, and come up with data rather than trying to do it for a year, because it may not, my suggestion is this may not make a brilliant project. But I mean, that's over to you. I think it's great if you've got different ideas. Does that make sense? Good. Good. So Jacob's going to perhaps tell us next week the data where he shows that for some people, a high GI food is high, and for others, the same food is low. That makes sense? Good. Okay, so that's part of our meeting next week. In the meantime, we will try and get some references to you. And I think that Tini Zunan and I certainly should talk together just after the grant's gone in, and get a clearer picture of where we think we should be going, understanding that Jacob could be doing something quite different. That reasonable? Does anyone want to run this any other way? No thoughts? Good. Okay. Well, that's good. So I'll say thank you, and let's see you next week. Take. The effect of what?
Eggs.
The effect of the height?
Dr. Jenkins, last week you were talking about the effect of eggs on CBD, like you were talking about the SMETA as well.
Oh, eggs, not high. Yeah, right. Have you, Dickon, have you got something with less echo on it? You echo really badly with me, so I can't. I hear a sort of, I can hear you twice, but can't really make out what it is. So you want to do the egg thing as well, is that right? Well, no. If you said if you don't want to do a glycemic index topic, that's fine. That is absolutely fine. And you can do an egg topic. That's fine too, or whatever. Or you can look at the effect of high glycemic index being low. I'm not trying to suggest to any of you that if you want to set out and do a project on your own, we're certainly happy to help. But we can give you a more discrete project if you do it in the glycemic index area. That's all we're saying. And I said you could do it on red meat, you could do it on eggs, you could do it on butter or cheese or dairy, whatever. Absolutely. So what I suggest you may want to think about where if you want to do a different topic. We're quite happy with that. All we're saying is that if you do it in these areas, we can give you more support because we know what we're doing. Or we think we know what we're doing, put it that way. So over to you. But can you somehow get some sort of better audio for next week? Jacob, are you with me? Yeah, good. See if you can. I mean, that'd be good if you can. That's great. So any other thoughts? Well, I should really ask those of you who are the other, you are remaining three. Does the glycemic index concept seem an interesting one to work on for you? Sort of fingers up, as it were, for thumbs up. If you think it's worth it, great. Jasmine thinks it's okay. What does Yuki think? She's not quite sure. Not giving it the okay. What about?
I think those
Yeah.
topics are very interesting, and I'm very happy to deal with the carb, maybe associated with other risk of cancer.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. That's fine. So that's for cancer. Yuki, any thought?
I just want to double check. We will decide a topic in the next meeting, right?
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so you want to wait and see what the topics are in the next meeting? Okay, that's fine. Good. So Yinan has already made a suggestion. Jasmine is right there, and but she'll be deciding too next time when we discuss the topics. That's good.
I was actually wondering if we do end up deciding to maybe pursue another topic, what kind of support we might be able to get.
Well, we can give you generic support, general support. But obviously, if you want the more detailed support, so, I mean, we will ask you, we may be able to give you a few references, but we may not give you all the references, certainly won't be able to give you all the references you need. So that's just for looking at the topic in general. And you will have to decide what question you want to ask in that related topic. Do you know what I mean? In other words, we won't say, look, we think, is X related to Y? That won't be as clear. You're going to have to decide what X is and what Y is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good. So, any other thoughts? No? Well, we'll see you all next week.
Sorry, I have a question not related to the research. Sorry, but it's about the, like, when I go through the syllabus, I see there are several whole day events. I wonder, like, if we are able to be absent for several hours during the day because we may have classes. And also there is an orientation meeting on September 23rd.
Well, if
and
it's our meetings, then we can certainly work around it for our particular meetings. For the course meetings that are organised centrally, do you know what I mean? The central course meetings, they like you to be there for the day, but I think there are only 2 meetings they've got in the whole year, hopefully. And then they give you some warning ahead of time so you can say if that's not a good day for you. Do you know what I mean? So that they can organise that in the course too. But there are some where they would like to see you for the day. We will try and have regular meetings, but it's just for us. So you can arrange what you want, don't worry. And if you want to have some meetings when we're not all there, that's fine. And that goes for everyone. So people may not be here at all meetings, but hopefully we have enough meetings so that nobody feels lost.
I just wanted to add for the course, like NFS course, when we did the whole day presentations, Dr. LeVay was like quite like accommodating to what our schedules were. So if you have like a course during the same day of the presentations, you could like miss like an hour or 2 or something like that, or go for half a day and watch like half of the presentations of the day. But you just have to email them about it.
thank you.
That's good. I think yes, we're not trying to be too prescriptive. Well, I'm sure you'll have lots of other thoughts, but hopefully we've got a year in which to sort them out. But I think we'd just like to keep things going so that we do get things underway.
I want to add a point for meta-analyses. Ideally, we would have 2 reviewers to double check each other's work for every step. So if some of you decide to get a brand new idea or pursue a topic on its own, then you can see if you can find any of your peers like here that are willing to do the same topic with you, or we have a lot of volunteers that you guys can work with together.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Thank you, Suna. Good. Well, you've had Tini and Zunan who've given some real grassroots ideas from people who've been through the course. In fact, they've been through the course quite extensive. They've been through the course for 2 years. You've had enough. But they're still with us, which is wonderful. It shows how tolerant some people can be. So, any more thoughts? Closing, closed. Right, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.